It's me coming on strong. Hope you're feeling blessed no matter where you are. Talk about a topic about intuition, simply because this is one of the first gifts that if you tap into can be very lucrative in your life, regardless if you're someone who follows spirituality or not. It's more tying into who you are and your connection to the source and to everything around you. But I also want to talk about the side of intuition that can be very emotionally straining and can drain you at times, and how we need to always be very regimented and how we share our energy and our intuition as well, because sometimes people can just latch on to you because of your intuition or because of your discernment or because of what you can offer them. So it's very important. And also to know that no matter how intuitive you are, sometimes it can be hard, because if you foresee things, like let's say you're somebody who sees premonitory things, premonition sees into the future, that might be hurtful, hard to swallow. And also because if you know certain things that come to pass and the reactions are not showing themselves at the moment, it's hard to sit back and to really do that, like give the wheel to God type of thing and say, well, I know this is going to occur. You can warn people, you can do your best at explaining things to people, but it doesn't mean that they're going to listen. So having to understand that as your intuition grows and you see the same challenges over and over, let's say you've seen 100 of the same intuitive nudges for different people, and then the outcome is the same every time, then you're correct. It doesn't mean that it's not easier to swallow, because sometimes you'll try your best to warn people and then they just obliviously deny you. And to take that in, to be like, oh, does somebody like not believe me, or and then also how to handle after the math when you are correct, and then they have to come back to you and sympathize with you and sit with you and say, how did you know? So sometimes there's levels to how intuition affects us, and I wanted to talk about this because as we do grow in our spiritual growth, our soul growth, I don't always like to use the word spiritual because there's so much jargon put upon the spiritual ones and things of that nature. We all have a spirit, we all have a soul. There are some of us that don't, but for those that do, you are granted this connection from the get, and the more in tune with it you are, there are different challenges that you'll face. So I wanted to talk about that. And it doesn't mean that you're going to know everything. And sometimes that can also be a burden too, because sometimes you would want to know everything in certain moments that are pertaining to your personal life or how it affects your life and your challenges. So realistically, intuition is something that we can always start off with, like it's a gut feeling, right? When we look at the word gut feeling, most of us can nod our heads and be like, oh yeah, I've had those, right? Now, when you have a visceral reaction, meaning your gut chimes up, that is a warning system, because you are now in the beginning budding stages of learning what it is to trust your intuition. The reason why it's a stomach related feeling is because you might be somebody who negates the intuition or doesn't respond to the intuition or doesn't react to the intuition, or you're just learning how this all works. And let's say, for example, the first beginnings of that training usually tends to be this visceral gut feeling, meaning your gut doesn't sit well, so that you start to understand, okay, if I listen to this reactive visceral reaction in my body and I react to it. Now, for myself, when I was younger, I used to get gut feelings all the time. And I'll tell you, as someone who didn't listen at times, when I didn't listen, the repercussions were pretty catastrophic. And I can say that usually when it's those really deep gut feelings, it's a warning, it's a protection system, so that you can protect yourself from something that's down the road that your soul already knows is going to take place. And you have that chance to, go a different direction to avoid it. Because not everything is made to be experienced. Not everything has to be experienced. However, it always is based on choice, right? So if your soul knows that a certain choice will be made, either you go towards this situation that causes the eruption, or you can decide against it. And also at the same time too, what you have to realize is you deciding based on your gut feeling what to do is also a choice too. So it's not to say that it's not just a protection measure, it's not just a warning measure, it's also like a test measure, because it's also to say, okay, you're going to see this negative outcome so that you can realize that every time you get this feeling, it's trying to prepare you and also get you more acclimated and comfortable with the idea of your intuition. After a while of gut feelings happening to you and you start to listen, meaning like every time you get one, you just go and do the opposite direction. Like, let's say, for example, if you have a gut feeling and let's say you're about to like get in a car with some friends, your gut feeling is saying, don't get in that car. You know, if you're about to go on a trip and you're getting a gut feeling, you're not supposed to go on that trip. If you're getting a gut feeling about, let's say, going into work, you're not supposed to go into work. It can stem from any type of scenario that you're facing, but the immediate, whatever action you're about to do, be it go get groceries, like I said, there's so many different variations, but you're not supposed to, you're not supposed to walk into an action. It's not about like, oh, I was about to brush my teeth. No, it's more about where you were headed or where you're heading. That is where you have to avoid. And not for nothing, I'm not saying all of you will plummet to your death if you don't listen. However, usually it's something that is very intrinsic and can be somewhat of a let's say, for example, you get in the car and the person gets into an accident. Maybe everybody doesn't get hurt, but it stalls your whole day. And let's say you miss out on going on a date, you miss out, there's costs to it. There's a whole bunch of other things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to die. That's not it. It's just that it's a lag. It's a, it's a drag on the day. It could, lead to something more detrimental to your existence. But at the same time, it's also just to teach you, like, hey, you didn't listen. This is what occurred. Now you missed out on A, B, C, and D because you didn't listen. Had you had listened, you would have been able to go on the day. You would have been able to go get the groceries and do the day out and have the day work out the way you wanted it to. So it's not to say that it's bad, but that's the first signs of intuition. Once you've gotten through stages of this, and then this can take years because sometimes it's hard to believe that, because usually on the other end of that intuition is something you may want to do. Like it could be like, oh, a trip to New York or a trip to somewhere pleasant, and you're like, I'm getting this gut feeling, and it's like, oh, do I not go on the trip? I'll give you guys an example. I had a gut feeling once when I went to LA. I had a really bad gut feeling. I couldn't shake it, but I had planned it with my friend. We'd already bought the tickets. Everything was fine. However, the whole trip went fine. And then it was on our flight back that something really bad happened. It was that we were stuck in a airport in Texas for about 2 days because of a huge hurricane and a hailstorm. We had no food, no water, no nothing. We all smelled like shit. We all didn't have food to eat. We were starving. It was really, really trying to even get out of that place. And we had to sleep on the floor. And it was like really, it was a really bad situation. And it was also very scary because a lot of the windows were getting broken by hail the size of soccer balls, so at any point in time we could have all come to our deaths or been severely injured. So the thing is that it doesn't necessarily mean that the trip itself will go bad, but there may be something on the trip that occurs. So I realized from that situation that I should have listened to my intuition. Had we had maybe taken a different flight, that wouldn't have happened. But it's hard to say how it'll play out. The point is that the intuition knows ahead of time that something detrimental will happen to you, and it's not for you to decide what that thing is. It's for you to listen to it and for you to understand, okay, and you can test this. A lot of us do test this a lot, and most of us do come to that conclusion that, oh, I should have listened to myself. Oh, my gut feeling told me I shouldn't have done this. And we need to sit in that moment and realize that the next time it occurs, we learn from it, we get better at it, and that's how our intuition grows, and you succeed off into the next let's say plateau of existence when it comes to intuition, because you no longer get gut feelings. You start to listen to your inner wisdom, ergo your higher consciousness, your higher self, and then you start to build that bridge so that you're always, and not always, but most of the time your intuition starts kicking in. Sometimes as you go to this next plateau and you start to have this interaction and know who your higher self is, you'll notice that you get chiming in the ears from right to left. That's the next stage, because again, it's still visceral. You can still feel it. The twinge is like, ee! And then you're like, whoa. That form of intuition has to do with, now that you've graduated from the gut feeling one, now it's teaching you how do you communicate with that inner wisdom and listen to yourself. So what happens when you get into the whole ear ringing thing is you'll notice that whatever thoughts you were thinking at the moment right before it, and this takes time too to maybe jot down or to remember. I still do this till this day. Like, let's say I was having a thought like, oh, I should go and it's usually about ideas and plans that I have for my business or for like some type of innovative idea. And then it's like all of a sudden it's like, ee! And I'm like, okay, that's a good innovative idea. That's something I should follow along with. That's something that will bring prosperity in my life should I succeed in it or follow through with it. So sometimes these ringings of the ears is just to show you that your trains of thought, where you're headed in your inner processes, your inner thinking, your inner wants is the right track for yourself. So it starts in succession. And once your ringings kind of desist a bit, then you start to see the signs that show up in your actual physical world. So again, still visceral, still with the eyes. So it's like it's like as if somebody were to walk on a tightrope with a partner, and you're walking on this tightrope and the partner's with you all along holding your hand. Eventually you're just holding the partner's finger, and then eventually the partner's just walking alongside you to make sure you don't fall, and then eventually you're walking the tightrope. That's kind of how intuition is. That's how your higher self works with you. That's how your guides and your intuition works in general. And once you successfully start walking that tightrope of intuition, you start to trust more of who you are. When you get those great ideas, you start to go, that's a pretty good idea. And you'll notice that the signs around you concur with that. Some people say it boils down to things like their angel numbers. Some people have individual numbers or markers. What I like to call them is markers, because they could be signs. Like, let's say for every time you have a good idea, you see a hawk fly by, or every time you have a good idea, you see like a sliver of a moon, something like that. They're markers or tokens of appreciation or understanding only to you. They only mean something to you. They don't mean something to everyone else who sees them. So you have to realize that all of this world is kind of guided towards teaching you that acceptance and that understanding. And that's why intuition is something that you need to gradually graduate through. And it's not like as if everyone knows everything at all times, because that would that would defeat the whole purpose of the living experience. That would defeat the whole purpose of living a human life. If we knew everything, we wouldn't be learning anything. So technically intuition is there to guide you. And also at the same time too, why I say that intuition can bring upon let's say different types of burdens, in the sense of like when you get really good at it. And when, let's say for example with me, I use my intuition as a profession. So it's like when I'm reading people and we're having these dialogues, right? People sometimes, where I have to always meet people where they're at. And sometimes when I'm getting higher intuition come down and explain things to me about what the person's situations are, it's like, I think these are such profound messages, right? And the person could easily just slide those messages aside and be like, oh, well, I was wondering if I should get a new car, or I was wondering if my boss is going to give me a raise, or I was wondering, they're more interested in their 3D ties to their existence than they are to why they're so worried about things bottoming out for them. And sometimes their higher intuition is giving them messages specific to what they are interfering, like what the interference is on a grander scale. Like why the person is preoccupied with these smaller things sometimes can be because they live in some form of lack, that they're always worried about something bottoming out, but they're not going to listen to that intuition that I'm providing them because they're not at that stage. And that can be somewhat of more hard to swallow if you are someone who works in your intuition. And sometimes you could say, oh, this might happen to you, and it can injure the person in some way, shape, or form, because you may have seen a vision that shows you that this may happen, and then it may not happen right away, but when it does, the person A can be scared of you because you saw it. 2, they feel like they were warned and there's feelings to work through. And 3, they can start to either believe you, or they can walk away from you and they can separate themselves. So intuition at times, especially when it intermingles with other people, can be a challenge. And I want to just say that that's something that you have to understand. It's kind of like when you're in school, like when kids see that you're like the best at a certain sport, right? They kind of put you on a pedestal to some degree, but then they also mock you at the same time for your greatness. So I'm not saying that being intuitive is a form of greatness, but it's like people can change their tune to you if you can in tune to them. So please know that intuition does have its challenges as well. It's not all like, and a lot of people like come to me and they're like, oh, what's the lottery numbers? They think that life is made up of lottery numbers and luck and things of that nature, which it is. I'm not saying that people can't be lucky or people cannot win the lottery, but not everyone is made to win the lottery, and not everybody is made to be a millionaire, gajillionaire, or famous, or whatever the case may be. Prepositions to think that also challenges their intuition, because they feel like, oh, if I'm a good person, then that means I should be getting A, B, C, and D. And it showcases a lot more to do with their healing. It showcases a lot more to do with how they are not comfortable just being, maybe slightly on the more mundane side, but it's also limiting the ways that you can see intuition, but like how you could actually tap into manifestation, how you can tap into things like abundance. So the thing is that sometimes when somebody wants to win the lottery, it's because they have, let's say, issues with money, and they have issues with paying things, or they have issues with family problems, or they don't have their house is needing renovations, etc. It's really for underlying reasons. It's not because they just want to be a million cajillionaire. It's because they're struggling with certain manifestations within their own life. Now, if they were to grow in their intuition, then they would learn to work with transmutation, which is to work through those emotions, work through those challenges, and start to use those challenges and bring them into a place of power. So when you start to learn that manifestation is all by your will and your willing, you have to work through all the blocks that stop you from manifesting. It's the negative rhetoric that you've been fed since you were a kid. It's the negative rhetoric that you feel less than, that you think abundance is limited. Those are the things that need to be broken first before you can, let's say, win that $1 million. Because realistically, not all of us care about these things. Like, my form of abundance is finding a partner to live the rest of my life with. That's my form of abundance. You know what I'm saying? And it's because mostly when it comes to money, I don't worry for anything. If I need something, it shows up. If I want something, I work towards it. But some people struggle with this, so they always formulate this idea of like, oh, if I'm a good person, then this jackpot should be there. And realistically, it's not always like that. Intuition starts to teach you how to see the world in the framework of like what is specific to your lessons, what is specific to your life path. Like, most people, when they do past life regressions, it's like they're always being told there's some queen, there's some king, there's some nobleman, there's some rich person. That's majority of us are not these people. And there's nothing wrong with being the shoemaker. There's nothing wrong with being the baker, and there's something to be said about the onus that someone needs to realize, that maybe what you don't realize about a baker and a shoemaker is that they're pivotal to a village, that people depend on them. People couldn't walk a mile in those shoes without you, and people wouldn't have food in their bellies without a baker. So there's always something to be said about how we view the world in forms of like what abundance is, what should be looked at as a fruitful existence. So that's why I'm saying intuition has to work in all realms of understanding of who you are. So I wanted to point that out. And it is also burdensome because sometimes you will see things that you don't want to see. Sometimes you'll see things about people you don't want to see. And sometimes you have to be the bearer of bad news or that messenger. You know what I mean? And being a messenger and bringing news to someone that isn't that easy to relay also comes with the course of learning and accepting what intuition truly is in all of its forms. Because there's times, for example, because I said my intuition is open, I'll be walking down the street and I'll have a message to give somebody, and it's not the best message. You know what I mean? But I have to relay it, and most of the times it brings about healing for them. Very seldomly have I ever had somebody retaliate and get mad, but I know as a person living a regular life, when I have to go stop somebody in their regular life and say, hey, I'm a stranger, but I have this message, it brings up so many more questions. And the person just sits there and goes, how did you know this? Where are you? Who are you? All these things. But the point is that message is relieving them of something. It needed to be said, and you work with spirit and you start to step into those things a lot easier. So that's what I can say about intuition. It's not a cut and dry thing, and you don't know what steps will be asked of you as you graduate in your own intuition. And then what's even more hard is when you don't know something. Like, we as individuals, we're not meant to know everything. Like I said, we live our lives. Like, for example, what I just went through last week was really hard, okay? And I now realize through my intuition what may be transpiring in my life. So this is going to cut into a different section of what it could mean when you start to be intuitive to a point where you start to see things unfold in your life and that you're guided towards. So for a lot of my life, I couldn't understand why at times throughout my life, I have been a person who has been around people when they die. And I don't mean like at a funeral, I mean like when they breathe out their last breath. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not maybe the closest family member. I mean, I'm a friend or I'm a family member, but not the closest. And for some reason in my lifetime so far, I've had like 5 or 6 people where I am the last person they see. I am the last person there when they die. So this week that just passed was really hard for me because I was at a conference and I was doing really well. I don't know if you guys saw it, but I was a keynote speaker talking about the higher self. The first day didn't go so well. Only 3 people showed up to my talk and I was like, whatever, let's do it. The second day was awesome. I had like 15, 16 people that showed up. I'm a newbie, so I can't expect the world to show up, but it was so amazing just to be in a room on that, you know, in the front of everyone with that mic and just like saying my piece about the higher self and actually helping people and teaching people and having them ask questions. It was really like, you know, it really hit home. But on a Saturday night, I had gotten a couple texts from a family member and I got busy. I was reading people. I was making a lot of good connections and I let go of those messages. And on Monday night, I got a call from my aunt and she was like, oh, we got to go check on your Uncle Ricky. And I was like, my heart sank like right away. Like when she said that, I was like, why are we going to check on Ricky? And my heart, when it sank, I was already getting that visceral feeling. Like I said, with intuition, it has to do with visceral. But the thing is, when it comes to things like intuition that is going towards, let's say, a negative situation, we can push against it so roughly because we don't want our intuition to be right. And that's something that I can say only happens to me once in a blue. I've only had 2 times where my intuition I fight. One was this scenario where I didn't want to say out loud what I thought took place before we walked into it. And 2 was with my twin flame, because I have a person in my life that I know wholeheartedly my intuition is not wrong about, but I let it go and I just let it desist because it's not on me to tell this person everything that's going to happen. And I've explained to this person over and over again in videos and tried, but it never took shape. So again, when you have intuition, you have to kind of like, you know, give God the wheel and stand back and let things unfold. So when it came to the second situation that just happened this week, when my aunt told me, like, let's go check on my uncle, my heart was already sinking because I was like, nah, this isn't good. My uncle loses his phone all the time. He's a partier. He's like in his, you know, he's in his early 60s, but he still hits the town. He's a single guy, never had kids, and he loses his phone like nobody's business because he'll get like into a party scene, drunk, whatever, and he loses his phone. So automatically she was like, oh, maybe he lost his phone. And my gut was saying, nope, nope, nope. And what also triggered me was the fact that it was my aunt Elsie, who has also been somebody who has always been around those that pass away, way more so than I have ever been. I always called her the death doula of my family group, and let's say in her inner circle, meaning her neighbors have always died around her. She's always taken care of those dying. It's just something she naturally does, and that's what I think death doulas are. They're just somebody who gravitates to be that last person when people die. So when it was my aunt, that aunt asking me, I was like, uh-oh. I was like, oh, great. So we go and we go up to the apartment we both thought it was, because I mean, when you don't know somebody's apartment right off the top, because you're always being brought with them bringing you to the apartment, we hesitated. Like we knocked and no one opened, and we asked some other people on the floor, upstairs, downstairs, and they were like, yeah, we think he's there, but we don't know. So I said to her, I was like, you go check Christine, this woman who knows him, a good friend, on the first floor, and I'll go check the directory. And when I go to the directory, I find 605 is his apartment. It says Rick, full on. And all I heard was, Ash, I'm here, coming from behind me. Ash, I'm here. And again, I didn't want to listen. I didn't want to say what I thought it was, because it's not that I'm scared to tell my aunt. I was scared to tell myself, because I knew with my intuition and with what I'm capable of, I didn't want to listen to what that was, because I knew that if he was here behind me, means that he wasn't upstairs, so to speak. So we go, and lo and behold, I was correct, and it broke my heart. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to face. I've never been, like, I've been around death when people are dying, but I've never walked into when a body is like passed away. And it wasn't even close in time. It wasn't even like we could have saved him or anything. He had been gone, I think, based on what I believe, Saturday night. So we were getting there Monday because of like, and it killed me because when I went back to the messages, I saw that he had left me like a futuristic message like, oh Ash, I got, you know, a new battery for the watch you gave me, and I'm so excited, I'm gonna go see the specialist on Monday and blah blah blah. And I never wrote back because I was so busy with the readings from the conference. And when I stood there with his lifeless body, I went up to him and I just touched his chest, just for, you know, my own solace, I guess, just to feel like what it was like to not feel a soul in a body. And there's such a difference, you know. He was hard, he was cold, he had been there for some time, and it was just so hard to swallow because I never seen a body in my life that way, right? Like, I've seen them at funerals, but I've never walked in and been the one who found one, right? But I know that intuition doesn't mean that you're going to know everything. You know what I mean? I didn't know on Saturday when I was sitting down after the conference. I went to go have a martini and just like regale in the night I had had. And I didn't have that intuition to tell me like, oh, he's passing away today. And rightfully so, because a soul can always choose, like, you know, who finds them, who's there when they pass, etc. So I think he wanted to die on his own terms and without us knowing. And, you know, but it did hurt more because of the job I have. It did hurt more because of the career I am in. And it's also telling that even if you have good intuition, even if you are someone who knows a lot about a lot of things, doesn't mean that you're going to know everything. And that can also be hard to swallow too, because bad things can still happen, detrimental things can still happen, you know, hard life things can still happen. And it doesn't take away from the challenge, and it doesn't take away from yourself, and it doesn't take away from the connection to the intuition you have. You can't be mad at yourself. You can't be mad at yourself because you don't know the lottery numbers. You can't be mad at yourself because you don't know what future spouse is around the corner. There's certain things in life that you're not supposed to know. And the reason being is because in order for you to get to that place of all of that of which you want to manifest, you need to live in the trajectory you were going to live without the knowledge. I figure this much all the time because sometimes I do tell people about future things. I don't know that I'm telling them about future things, but then I get calls 6 months later or 8 months later or a year later from some of the people I read, and they were like, how the hell did you know I was going to be here? How the hell did you know? And the reason why sometimes the higher consciousness does put those tidbits in a reading that I do is because they don't even pay attention to it. It's so outlandish, let's just say, or it's something that they're like, I think this girl's full of, you know, shit. But then when it does happen, they call back just to confirm and freak out and say, how did you know this? But really it's because if you know something that's so important, like who's around the corner, who's the love of my life, if like you're never going to get these answers directly. That's why sometimes when people are like doing tarot or things like that, they're like, oh, it's this person, that person. I don't believe that that's accurate, simply because you are then going to target exactly what that person told you. So if the person told you, oh, they always wear orange socks, your eyes are going to be darting towards all the socks you see that are orange, and you're going to be like, maybe it's that guy, maybe it's that guy. So future predictions are very hairy, because realistically, to ever land in the manifestation that you want in your heart, in your soul's relation, because you have to understand time in this sense seems linear, but it's already happening. It's already in its midst of happening. And that's why when people say, like, how do you figure out about future? Like, how does that work? This is the best way I can say. People have factory settings of who they are in their soul. There are things intrinsic to you that will always be there no matter what happens to you, what shapes you. You will fundamentally have these factory settings of who you are. And how we can understand this is, like, if let's say somebody told you about someone you hadn't seen for like 10 years or 20 years, let's say some childhood friend of yours, you could hear it in a situation like from another childhood friend say, oh, you know, Bob, he ended up meeting the girl, you know, down the street that he really loved to date, but he ended up breaking up with her because he was worried she was going to take him for his money. That's just a weird scenario, but I'm giving that scenario. And let's say, for example, you've known Bob since he was a kid, and he was that kid that was always like hoarding all his stuff to him. He was always scared someone was going to take his lunch money, or he was always somebody that was like fearful that everyone was around the bend that was going to like jump on him or pounce on him. He was somebody who was very paranoid about people. When you hear that scenario, even though it's 20 years later, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. He was always a paranoid fuck. You know what I mean? And those are innate things that you would only know about a person, or usually people that you grow up with. You know about yourself, you know about your parents, you know about your siblings, and it's like you could not see these people for like 30-40 years. It doesn't matter what the world has put them through. There's these intrinsic factory settings that someone has in their soul that they will always decide things based on those factory settings. And I feel like that's why the future isn't really something that isn't able to be foretold, because if all the questions you're asked in life, if all the decisions you have to make are still being asked to the same person, realistically, you're like God or your soul or your oversoul is always going to know how you answer. Realistically, because if you're posed in certain situations based on your factory settings, based on who you are, you will most likely pick that answer or that direction. And that's why I think God situations come in, because if it's something that's detrimental to you, your soul already knows which way you're going to choose all the way to that decision making where something pivotal could show up. So like, for example, like I'll give my example, like if you guys have tuned into me, right? There was a point in time where I said no to my mission. I said to Creator, no, I don't want to do this. And Creator said back to me something that was so understandable at the time. God said back to me, well, if you don't take it on, your children will, right? At that time, I had no freaking clue what the Creator was trying to tell me. Okay, it made no sense whatsoever. But God knew that based on all my life path and every decision I was going to make, that I literally spent 13 years getting to the same position I was 13 years before. And when God proposed that same question, I was literally staring at my just newborn child. That I could only answer that question at that time wholeheartedly because of all the decisions and my life was performing at that very moment. God knew that if I didn't decide then that I was going to go through this whole journey, choose all the things I was going to choose, I was going to end up with this kid, and then I was going to have the answer to that question proposed to me 13 years before. And that's what I'm trying to say. God knows your soul better than anybody. God knows you better than anybody. Your oversoul knows you better than anybody. And as you start to learn about your intuition and you start to unfold your who you are as a general person, you start to know who you are better than anybody. So sometimes when people say like, oh, the future's already mapped out, it kind of is, because you will choose based on who you are, your factory settings. It's very unlikely that you're going to choose against your factory settings. So you will end up in the place you're supposed to be based on your factory settings. And that's why future is all happening at the same time, because based on who you are, given the situations you're given, you're always going to choose based on your factory settings. So that's why I feel like the future is unknown, in the sense of like, even if you're intuitive, but based on who you are, if your manifestations are in alignment with your soul, you will have them, because your future seemingly feels untold. However, your manifestation is based on soul regulation, if it is best for your soul's journey and path. And should it be, you will make the decisions and the path will align for that manifestation to unfold. So when you go to people that are telling you what your future can be in a more like direct, close sense, like, oh, in 2 weeks you're going to meet a man who's wearing a red hat, right? You're going to create that because they told you what hat to look out for and they told you what man to look out for. So you're basically going to choose your way to that manifestation. Ergo, the future is made and the future is correct, and that prediction is correct as well. So that's why I'm saying, when I'm doing readings, I feel like when the higher self does give these little tidbits, it's not for today, it's down the road, and it's so based on who you are as a soul, who they know you to be. And realistically, because time is hard to understand in this linear sense, everything is already written. So you just have to walk the path, get as close to who you are in your inner self, in your intuition, and these things that you want to manifest will unfold. If you're going against that intuition and you're going against your path, unfortunately, you're gonna have to take a detour maybe, but you will eventually get there. And that's the whole thing. And let's say, for example, if you do pass away before you've reached that enlightenment or you've reached that understanding, there are many, many lifetimes that you can animate and do it again until you realize it. So there's never any pressure from the other side to be someone, be somewhere, be something. It's more of the proposition that's brought in this 3D existence that makes you feel like you have to be these things. But really, the soul is not really forcing you to be anything. Your soul's guiding you all the time. Your intuition's with you 24/7. Your higher self is always giving you tidbits. And that visceral understanding with your gut is where it starts. So I hope this helps. I love you guys a lot. I'm going through what I'm going through with my, the passing of my uncle, because it was very traumatic. But I'm also realizing that maybe the doula role may end up on me as my aunt is aging and she might not be there forever. As most of us know, we are not. And I may be stepping into that role for my family. And I feel like my gut is telling me that that's true. Peace. Love you lots. Till next time.